here. We're going to be talking about what is new in Power Pages. So I'll just do a little bit more of an introduction. My name is Nicholas Hayduk. I'm the president of Engineered Code Consulting Inc., based here in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I am a Microsoft MVP along with Rick and Kunal and I'm not sure who else, and Malcolm, of course. And I, as been mentioned a few times, I began my career at ADX Studio. If you folks don't know who ADX Studio is, we'll talk about that here in just a bit. But I've been working with Power Apps portals, Power Pages, ADX Studios, all those things since about 2009, since they kind of were birthed out of the office in Regina. So if you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so. We've got a Twitter feed that you can follow. We have a blog that I've recently started doing quite a bit more. It kind of went dormant for a couple of years, but I'm doing about a monthly post on the blog. We have a YouTube channel that we do a weekly kind of 2-minute little tip video. Again, all of this stuff is really focused on Power Pages. We also have our community call that we do every month. So that is a 1-hour session where we kind of go through the latest news. We talk about some kind of deep dive into a particular topic, and it's a good opportunity to kind of ask questions and engage with the community. So we have that as well. And if you're not sick of me enough by that, then we also have a podcast. So I do a podcast with George Dubinsky, who is another MVP that does a lot of portals work. So we have a podcast called Refresh the Cache that is available as part of the CRM.audio network. So, yeah, lots out there. And yeah, if you're getting into Power Pages, hopefully there's at least one or two of those things that are of use to you folks. So what are we going to do today? So we're going to talk about first, I'm not sure if everyone on the call knows what Power Pages is. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Power Pages, we will kind of talk about that briefly. And then I will also talk about kind of what's new with Power Pages. So for those of you who have been around and kind of seen the whole journey from ADX Studio, we'll talk about kind of what's been new and kind of what is it about Power Pages that makes it new, what makes it exciting. And so we'll talk about that as well. So what is Power Pages? So it is one of the products of the Power Platform. It's alongside what we've got: Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, Power Virtual Agent. I'm sure I'm missing one. There's just so many products now in the Power Platform, but it is a product within the Power Platform. So its feature, its use is that it is a low-code web development platform. Built on top of Dataverse. So if you don't know what Dataverse is, but you know what Dynamics CRM or Dynamics Customer Engagement, Dataverse is the database that all of that kind of resides on. So if you have Dynamics CRM or Dynamics Customer Engagement in the cloud, you have Dataverse. Dataverse is where you go in and you say, hey, I want to add this table. Hey, I want to add these fields, messaging with the form. So anything that's a model-driven app, anything that's Dynamics CRM, that's all built on top of Dataverse. So Power Pages is a way to build websites on top of Dataverse. So it's gone by a few different names over the years. You might know it previously as Power Apps portals. It was also known as Dynamics 365 portals. And way back in the day, it was known as ADX Studio portals. So ADX Studio was a company, again, based here in Regina, actually in the office building where Ryan Monks and his colleagues operate out of. They were basically a Microsoft partner that built a content management system. So before they got into the whole Dynamics CRM space, ADX Studio, what they built was a .NET, so a Microsoft kind of ecosystem content management system. And a content management system is essentially a piece of software that makes it easier to build websites. So it allows people who are not, professional website builders to manage the content on a website. So, hey, I can create new pages, and I can add images, and I can add text, that sort of thing. So content management systems, you may have heard of other popular ones like WordPress or Wix or Squarespace. Like there's all these kind of popular sites out there so that, you don't need to know a whole bunch of code and HTML to build a website. They give you these platforms to help you build websites. And ADX Studio had their own kind of proprietary .NET CMS. At the time, the Microsoft Dynamics CRM, as it was then known, was becoming more and more popular, more and more of a thing. And the ADX Studio folks essentially saw that as a platform that you could build a content management system on top of. So back in the day, there was this whole kind of XRM movement. So you had Dynamics CRM, but so CRM standing for customer relationship management. But really, Microsoft had built this platform that we now kind of know as model-driven apps, Power Platform, all that stuff. Even way back then, like in 2009, 2010, there were still a lot of people saying, hey, I need this development platform, but I'm not using it for customer relationship management. I can kind of build anything on top of this. So what ADX Studio chose to do was build a content management system on top of the Dynamics CRM database, which eventually became Dataverse. So that went pretty well. I guess well enough that in 2015, Microsoft decided to acquire them because they essentially felt that it was necessary for some sort of portal solution to be out of the box. And even before that, actually, Microsoft had acquired kind of bits and pieces. Microsoft acquired like a starter portal. So they basically kind of got a basic or a light version of ADX Studio portals that ADX Studio maintained on their behalf. So even before 2015, Microsoft had already had kind of pieces and brought them into the Microsoft fold. But then in 2015, Microsoft kind of gobbled the whole thing up and said, "No, we want this product. This product needs to be from us." And so that's where Dynamics 365 portals came into it. So eventually, and we'll talk about this a little bit as to kind of what Power Pages is. We had Dynamics 365 portals, so it was really kind of a niche product or an add-on to Dynamics 365. Then the Power Platform continued to evolve. It continued to grow. They introduced the idea of you have model-driven Power Apps, you have Canvas apps, and then eventually they said the third type of app are Power Apps portals. So you can kind of see the evolution of this product. So it started off as this ISV product from ADX Studio. It then got acquired by Microsoft. It became essentially kind of an add-on for Dynamics. And then it kind of moved into the Power Platform as one of the types of Power Apps. So then it was Power Apps portals. And now it's Power Pages. So it's moved basically to the top. It's one of the kind of the main products that are a part of the Power Platform. So what makes it a little bit unique within the Power Platform itself is that it allows a variety of authentication methods. So much of the Power Platform is aimed at the staff or like the internal users of the organization. If you're building Canvas apps, if you're building model-driven apps, if you're using Dynamics 365 customer engagement, the primary users of that are internal users. They're, to get technical, it's Azure AD users. That is not the case for Power Pages. Power Pages, while can be very useful for internal users, the kind of the primary, the more common use case is actually to allow users who aren't internal to your organization to interact with data that exists in the Power Platform, and specifically Dataverse. So with Power Pages, you set up these websites where people can log in, and they can log in using Facebook. They can log in using Twitter. Again, you have the control as to how you want them to log in, but it's not specifically tied to Azure Active Directory. So you can have users from all different parts of the business, external, internal, using Power Pages. So that's what really sets Power Pages apart from the rest of the Power Platform, is that it's a tool built by internal users, but often meant for external users. And it's the way that you have people outside of the organization interacting with data in Dataverse. That's really where it helps. So the classic use case for Power Pages would be a help desk. So think of it as an add-on to your Dynamics 365 customer engagement. If you had the customer service module, you have users managing the cases that are coming in. And so, yeah, someone can call in and then your staff are entering in those case details manually. Sure, they can send an email and you can have case routing and you can have it automatically create cases, all that sort of stuff. But in the 21st century here, most people are expecting there to be a website where they can go on and submit a case themselves. And that is what Power Pages does. So if you're building out a Dynamics customer service implementation, and you want a way for external users to create and create a case, add comments to it, upload files, all that sort of stuff. Power Pages is the way that Microsoft has built out to do that. So I did want to just quickly show a sample of that. Just going to log out here. So what I've got on my screen here is Power Pages site. This is one that if you ever watched any of our videos, this is kind of the site that we use to kind of demo and show a bunch of different things. So this is a standard kind of implementation of the customer self-service portal for Power Pages. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign in. I've already kind of registered an account. But the idea is that I can go in here, I can type in my username and password. And then once I sign in, I have access to different parts of the site. Again, I can control whether, the knowledge base is available to anonymous or authenticated users. But in this particular case, I've signed in and I have access to different parts. So with the customer self-service portal specifically, and we'll talk about kind of these different templates that we have available to us, but just as an example, this customer self-service portal, all kind of focused around the help desk. We've got the My Support area. So here are the support cases. So if I open a new case, what I'm actually doing is I'm directly talking to Dataverse. I'm directly talking to Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement. And when I submit a case here, that is submitting directly into my database. So I can say, I need help with that thing. I can select a case type here. And you'll see one thing that it's doing that's really cool is it's actually, when I type in this thing, it's actually searching the knowledge base that I have in Dynamics 365 Customer Service, and it's actually suggesting possible fixes to what my issue is. So this is called case deflection. The idea here is maybe they don't even need to submit a case. Maybe the information that the user needs already exists somewhere in the knowledge base. So, possibly we can just avoid a case altogether. But in this case, I'm just going to keep going. You can select a subject here and put in a description. I can attach files, and then I can click Submit. So again, this is saving the data directly to Dataverse. It's saving it directly into the case table that exists in Dynamics 365 Customer Service. And now I can see my case listed here. I can go into here. I can view the details on it, and I can update details if I want. I can also add comments, and if comments are added in the customer service app that exists in Dynamics 365, there's a possibility to kind of have that back and forth interaction between people. So this really opens up a whole kind of bunch of use cases for help desk. As I mentioned, there's also some other features that are included in this customer self-service. One is the knowledge base. So again, it's searching the knowledge base as you're creating a support case, but you can also allow your users to just browse the knowledge base. So these are knowledge articles created directly within customer service. You have the control to say, hey, yes, I want this particular knowledge base article to be included or excluded from the web, but essentially a way to publish data from the knowledge base that already exists to external users. Another really kind of common use case for the customer support is also actually IT help desks. So that's the case where internal users might use this as well. You have a large organization where the help desk is using Dynamics 365 Customer Service. There's a good chance that not everyone is going to have a Dynamics license and log a ticket manually in the back end. So what you do is you create a customer support portal, or there's actually one called the employee self-service portal that has all this same kind of functionality, but you have internal users log in and manage tickets themselves as well. So we have the knowledge base, we have discussion forums, so it's a way for people to ask questions in here, get support from potentially kind of other members of the community, and like I said, we've got the support section, which is the case management. So that's an example of what you can do with Power Pages. The big thing about it, if you've already used, if you're familiar with how you customize model-driven apps or Dynamics 365 customer engagement, where you're creating forms and you're creating views, the real key with Power Pages and what makes them a low code development platform is, you see this list that I'm looking at here. This list where it says my open cases, my closed cases, all my cases, this list is actually created by creating a view in a model-driven app. So I have a view called my open cases that has all these different columns in it, and that's what drives my Power Pages site. So if you already know how to build model-driven apps, if you know how to create the views and you know how to create the forms, you then basically go into Power Pages and you say, hey, I want to display this view on the site. I want to display this form, and you can kind of link it all together. So that's where, that's the real power of Power Pages. That's what makes it that low-code development platform, is that you can configure lists, you can configure the views all without writing a single line of code, and you can take those and very quickly add them to a site that can extend all that data to external users. So in the same way, if I'm going into here and I'm saying view details, this form itself, again, this is a form that's been defined in our model-driven app view, or within that model-driven app, or within the Dynamics 365 customer engagement apps. So the same interface that you'd use to kind of move fields around to configure those forms, that's exactly what you're doing in Power Pages as well. So that's really what's cool about it. If people are already familiar with Dynamics 365 customer engagement or model-driven apps, a lot of that knowledge translates directly to Power Pages, because essentially Power Pages is a web development platform that allows you to use those lists or those views from Dataverse and those forms to build web applications that allow users to interact with data from Dataverse.
Hey, Nick.
Yep.
Giving you a quick opportunity to catch your breath, can we just ask the audience today, does anyone else use any other portal technologies other than Microsoft Dynamics Power Pages?
I know I do.
What do you use?
Yeah, so this is not the only option that exists. In fact, so when Microsoft acquired ADXU, there were other competitors in the marketplace, and those other competitors have continued to evolve and to innovate and to create other solutions. So Power Pages, I don't think is always the best answer. So the two other big ones that I see being used, there's a product called the Portal Connector. Also, I believe built here in Canada, recently acquired. And so essentially the Portal Connector is an add-on for the Sitefinity content management system, which has similar functionality that allows you to build out forms and lists and tie it directly to Dataverse. So the Portal Connector is a very popular one. The other one that we use quite a bit is called Alexa CRM. And so that's a plugin that's for WordPress. So if you're doing any sort of WordPress development and you need to interact with Dataverse on that thing, again, similar functionality that you can create forms and views in a model-driven app and have those exposed on the web. So Power Pages is one option. The Portal Connector is another option, and Alexa CRM, which is a WordPress plugin for Dataverse. Those are other great tools. And they all have their different pros and cons. Some of it has to do with pricing, some of it has to do with what else you're doing on that particular site. So at a very high level, WordPress is popular because it's cheap and there's a big community around it. Sitefinity has a very robust content management system. So the one thing I would say about Power Pages is it is not, even though it started off as, we call it a CMS for building websites. I would strongly discourage you from considering Power Pages as your corporate website. It is not meant, its content management features are quite basic. What it's really good at is working with data in Dataverse. So whether that's, again, support cases, or you have, another very popular use case for Power Pages is a partner portal. So if you have organizations outside of yours that you partner with and they're submitting opportunities, submitting leads, managing customers, accounts, contacts, that sort of thing, allowing them a web interface to do that directly rather than them submitting something and then having to update that manually. That's another very good use case, because again, you're taking the data that's in Dataverse and you're allowing someone outside your organization to work with it. Now, of course, there's a very robust permissions model, so people can't see the things that you don't let them see. Yeah, if you're just looking at, hey, I just need mycompany.com, I need my website that has a homepage and a few kind of brochure style websites, I wouldn't be considering Power Pages for that. So Sitefinity is a very, robust content management system. So if you need those really strong capabilities and you just need like add a form to it where it submits a lead, that's where the portal connector is really strong because it is built into a much more robust content management system.
Thanks, Nick.
All right. So hopefully that was enough of a kind of overview for Power Pages. I guess I'm not paying. Is there any questions in the chat that I've missed? Oh, I see people have migrated away from Sitefinity and Portal Connector. Yeah, I mean, we've seen people go both ways. We've had clients that were on the old ADX Studio Portals version, and then when we moved them to the cloud, we essentially had to we went with the WordPress solution. Some of it has to do with licensing. A lot of it has to do with licensing. It has to do with volume. It has to do with kind of use cases. So it has to do with, like, for example, in those cases, the customer had a lot of custom code that we were able to continue to leverage in WordPress that we couldn't leverage in Power Pages. So yeah, it's one option. Obviously, it's the option Microsoft wants you to choose, but it's one of many options that exist for building Power Pages or building portal type things with Dataverse. All right. Next. So what is new in Power Pages? So my first little point here is nothing, but also lots, which seems maybe a little contradictory, but if you only come away with one bit of knowledge from this, is that I hope that you never ask someone, like when you're dealing with Power Pages, I hope you never say, how do we upgrade to Power Pages? Like, how do we pick between Power Pages and Power Apps portals? Like, which one should we pick? Because they are the same thing. They are literally the same product. Microsoft has given it a new name in the same way that they gave it a new name when they went to Dynamics 365 portals, Power Apps portals, Power Pages. They are the same product. Now, there may be a few points where that may seem a bit confusing because they're talking about, oh, you can spin up a new Power Pages site, or Power Apps portals can now be done in Power Pages. But I encourage you to think of it as Power Pages is just the latest version. So when the new version of the product came out, and we called it the new version, we called it Power Pages, and it was in preview. That was just the new version. Now, the people who were on the old version weren't immediately upgraded to the new version because it was still in preview. They were working out the kinks. But the minute Power Pages became generally available, all the people who were still using Power Apps portals got access to all this stuff. So there was no upgrade that needed to happen. There was no conversion that needed to happen. It was just a case of, here's the new version, and here's the path to get to the new version. It was really like, we've just turned on the editor for these old sites. So that's the main thing, is that this new name for the product doesn't change the fact that the product, I mean, I'm in the code quite a bit. There are still I'm sure there are still lines of code from when I was there in 2010. Like a lot of that code, like when it has to do with forms and views, like a lot of that code remains in there, and it's been in there for 10 years. So the fundamentals are not different. Microsoft continues to innovate, they add new features, all that sort of stuff. But this is not a new product, it's just the latest version of the same product. So Power Pages itself, yes, there's new features that weren't technically available before, but that's no different than, hey, version 10 of the product includes features that weren't in version 9. Yeah, that makes sense, but that doesn't make version 10 a new product and version 9 an old product. They're not different products, it's just the latest version. So that's the one thing I hope you come away with, because honestly, we still get questions. When the transition happened from Dynamics 365 portals to Power Apps portals, I gave this same little kind of speech. And even for months and years afterwards, I would still get questions about, oh, well, we're on the old one. What's it going to take to migrate? And it's like, no, you're already on the new one. So that's the one bit of information I hope. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine, that not that people don't understand, but it's kind of a pet peeve of mine that Microsoft kind of does these things. And if you read some of the blog posts, you might kind of get the impression that it's different than that. So I like to make it very clear that this is the same thing, just the latest version. But I would say what's the thing that has changed the most is licensing. So licensing has rarely in this space been a fun conversation to have. So maybe I'll do a little bit of a history. So when ADX Studio owned the product, you bought it as a piece of software, but it didn't include the hosting. So you pay your license for your piece of software. There was annual software maintenance, but there's kind of a one-time, initial upfront fee, and then you bought the software, and then someone kind of installed it for you, turned it on, all that sort of stuff. So that was almost 15 years ago now. So that's just kind of how software worked back in the day. When Microsoft acquired the product, they switched the model to be much more, basically it's a software as a service offering. So not only do you pay them monthly, but they actually handle the hosting for you as well. So you don't have to worry, you turn it on, it's part of the Power Platform, it's all hosted in Azure underneath the scenes, but the hosting's included as part of the product. When Microsoft first released their version, what they did is they said it's basically $500 a month per portal that you want to turn on. So if you wanted a portal for development, you wanted a portal for QA, for test, for production, each one of those was $500. Except for the fact that if you bought enough licenses, and usually the threshold, I think, started off at about 10. If you had 10 Dynamics licenses, you got a free portal. So what happened is that led to people being like, oh, I get a free portal. They turn it on production, they set it all up. And often people were much too cheap to actually turn on portals in development and QA and test. So you ended up in this weird situation where this kind of add-on was being done in not really kind of proper ALM ways of moving stuff between environments. But it meant that organizations somewhat got the impression that this thing was free because they had one add-on, they turned it on, it was free. So then they had this portal, and it was just kind of a free add-on to the platform. When Microsoft announced Power Apps portals, so they moved from Dynamics 365 to Power Apps portals, they completely changed the licensing model. So before is you kind of paid per site. When they switched to Power Apps portals, they changed it to be per user. So essentially, every time a user logged in, it used up one of these tokens. Now, that token was valid for 24 hours. So essentially, you paid every time someone logged into your site, that person could access it for 24 hours. But if they logged in again tomorrow, you paid paid for another token. And the token was, the token started off as kind of at the most expensive it was $2 for a token. So what you ended up with was $2 for every time someone logged into your site. And the challenge with that is that people had a really hard time estimating how many times is someone going to log into my portal every month. And everyone assumed, as they should, that they're going to build the world's greatest portal of all time, so that every user was going to log in every single day, and they were going to have millions of users. So if you quickly do the math, you have 1 million users, and they're logging in every day for a 30-day month. That's 30 million logins and times $2, so $60 million a month for my portal. And that's the kind of math, like, that's slight hyperbole, but not as much exaggeration as you might actually think. So that's the way that people estimate it. Now, the reality is that Microsoft built that pricing model using the actual data and seeing how often people are logging in to come up with kind of what they thought would be a fair price. But it's just such a difficult thing to do. Like I still to this day couldn't tell you, if I have a site up, how many times are people going to log in this month? What's much easier to guess is how many people am I going to have in a 1 month span. So the fantastic news, and what's really changed about the licensing, is once Microsoft introduced Power Pages licensing, the big change was they went from not daily active users, but monthly active users. And even probably more importantly, they didn't change the price of the login. So before you're paying $2 a day per user, now you're paying $2 a month per user. And of course, at higher volumes, you get up to 10,000 users, even bigger, 100,000 users. It kind of comes down to about 50 cents a user. And I always like to say, sometimes if you ask Microsoft nicely, there might even be better volume discounts there. But you're paying somewhere between, off the shelf pricing, somewhere between $2 or 50 cents per user that logs into your Power Pages site. So is it the cheapest thing out there? It's not, but it's, I think, relatively reasonable. I think it's in the right ballpark now. I think it's a lot easier to estimate. I think the estimates that I'm seeing with customers now are much more realistic than they used to be. So that's been a huge step forward. I mean, before this changed, licensing was a conversation that everyone in this space seemed to dread. But now I think that the licensing model is pretty clear. It's relatively easy to estimate. It's kind of the, I think it's in a pretty good spot right now. So that was a huge change. And so, honestly, whenever there was a call with anyone from Microsoft about what was then Power Apps portals, it quickly turned into a licensing discussion, and that was never fun. So I'm gonna pause here to see. I think there's some questions in here. Oh, there's a question about anonymous users. So anonymous users, that's the one place where it actually changed possibly for the worse with this new licensing model, where it made it so, we get asked quite a bit of like, oh, how do I make, like, I don't want to pay per login. So what can we do to kind of hack this around to make it work for anonymous users? Because anonymous users were quite a bit like it seemed like if you did the math that they were cheaper. So previously, anonymous users worked by page views. So because they were just anonymous, they weren't logging in, you basically paid per page view, and you got like 100,000 page views it was pretty cheap for anonymous users. Now Microsoft is charging, they do charge less for anonymous users, but the difference is it's not per page view, it's now per user. So Microsoft is using like tracking cookies and other sorts of techniques to attempt to identify the same anonymous user who's coming back to your site and charge you per that. So, I mean, I'll be honest with you, the use case for anonymous users are relatively small. In my experience, the vast majority of portals are people logging in and doing something. The use cases we've seen for anonymous portals are, you might have a knowledge base that you want to share with everyone. You might have some other kind of general information that the entire world should see. But in my experience, most portals have a front door that you don't get to see anything until you log in. But they have changed the licensing model so that it's per user and not per page view. So that's the new model for that. Does anyone have any questions about licensing? Or are there any other questions that there's a question how users can be restricted from logging into the portal more than the allowed count. They're not. There's no restriction. So if someone exceeds so essentially what you do is you say, I'm going to buy 100 logins, I'm going to buy 1,000 logins. You buy however many logins you want to buy. Now what happens when you exceed those? Nothing, honestly. Like there's no enforcement. The site doesn't explode. The user isn't prompted saying, hey, the owner of this site's too cheap to buy more logins, you can't get in. Nothing like that happens. The user can log in and business continues as usual. So then you may be asking, well, why would we not just say we're going to buy the lowest tier and then have a bunch of users? I mean, could you do that? You could, but there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. So first of all, that would be a violation of the licensing agreement you have with Microsoft. So I know Microsoft has a lot more lawyers than I do, so I probably want to make sure I'm kind of adhering to the licensing rules. But more practically, the number of licenses that you purchase for your Power Pages site directly impacts the amount of resources your site gets. So if you think of your site as an Azure server that's running somewhere, the more licenses you have, the bigger server Microsoft gives you. So if you have a server that you're paying for 100 users, but then you have 1,000 users, those 1,000 users are probably not going to have a great user experience because the portal is just not meant to handle that many users. So so again, if you think you're going to have 1,000 and 1 month you get 1,001, that's not going to be a big deal. My understanding is that Microsoft's looking at more like kind of more averages than anything. But if you're not doing the right thing and you're greatly exceeding your things, I would expect Microsoft would be getting in touch to make sure that you kind of come in line with what you're supposed to have. But there isn't any specific cutoff where they say, you buy 100, the 101st user isn't going to see a message saying you haven't paid your bill, you can't get in. Okay. Okay, I think that I haven't gone so far back in the chat, but I think that's what the questions that I missed. But if you do have any questions, feel free to come off mute and ask them as well. But now I'm just going to kind of talk about what else is kind of new. So there is the Power Pages Design Studio. That is the new low-code editor for Power Pages. It's essentially just the next version of what was the Power Apps Portals Design Studio. I honestly, there was for many years I didn't use the new low-code editors. I was just kind of stuck in my old ways. But man, Microsoft has put a lot of work into them. You can now build your lists and your forms and your views in there. It's a pretty cool user experience. So lots of work has been put in there. Microsoft is really kind of focused on the low code citizen developer type user experiences. So there's been a lot of work on there. So yeah, Robert said it's come a long way. Like honestly, a couple of years ago, I'd say like I don't use it. Now I use it quite a bit. So kudos to Microsoft on that. The other thing, and this one I will kind of bring up here, is templates. So I'm going to go to make.powerpages.microsoft.com.
Nick, before you get into templates,
yep,
the low code editors, is that what is replacing the old front side editor coming October 1st?
Yes and no. So I would say there's like they are retiring the front side editor. I wouldn't say that there's a direct replacement for it. So it's like there's a variety of different options for editing Power Pages. That one's going away. But yeah, I mean, this would be the direction they want to use. There's certain things that you just can't do in that other one. So I wouldn't say it's a direct replacement, but yes, I think that the thought is that people will be using this low code editor. So I can provide a sample here. So I can go into my sites here. I can click edit, and this will take me into this low code editor. But yeah, I mean, I think that if I was Microsoft, I'd be saying yes to your question. Since I'm not Microsoft, I'm saying yeah, but I hate to set the expectation that it's exactly the same. But yeah, I mean, you can go into here, you can manage your pages, you can use the editor, but there's just certain things like if you're using blogs, there's certain additional capabilities in that front side editor that just don't exist. But yeah, this is the editor in the low code, and so you can go into here, you can add components. This is where you can create forms, multi-step forms, lists. You can add Power BI. So yes, but with some caveats.
Nope, makes sense. Thanks, buddy.
Are they bringing Copilot here too?
Yes, they already do have Copilot here. So I don't know if I have it enabled here. Let me just see here. If I say form, see, oh look, we got Copilot right here. So Copilot exists in a few different places. This one is about helping you build a form. I think they have stuff that's going to help you edit content. Let me just see if that's available in here. So if I go into the text, what's this? Yeah, there's Copilot. So let's just say, the best CFL team is the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. I mean, I think we all agree on that. No controversy there. So if I click this, then I can get into here and I can start like saying, oh, I want to rewrite this. Let's see here. Oh, I guess I haven't turned it on for my environment, but I could say, hey, rewrite this in a more positive tone or a more negative tone or use whatever. So that's kind of one part of the Copilot. I think that there's also some AI for finding images, perhaps. And then there's Copilot for helping you build forms. I mean, honestly, it's like the building and form stuff is a little bit it's cool in a demo, but if you're actually building Power Pages, like it will only create new tables. So if you say, hey, I want like a form for a table that already exists, Copilot isn't aware that those forms already exist. So I would still say they're still kind of in the cool to see, but maybe not using it every day quite stage. But yes, Copilot is a big thing, as with any Microsoft product. Copilot is big, so Copilot does exist, and this is the interface for Copilot. I think there's also, I haven't played with this yet, but if we go into the chatbot, there's some AI built in here. So they now let you quickly create a chatbot, and in addition to kind of indexing the regular, like having the normal knowledge that the chatbot would have, it will also kind of automatically index any of the content that actually exists on your Power Pages site. So if you have a knowledge base that's publicly accessible, it will index all that and include that as part of the chatbot. So, and you can basically just like check a few boxes and it does that all for you.
Since we're talking about the chatbot and the AI, Nick, how we can manage the access of the chatbot to the backend data stored in the Dataverse, and how we can make sure that the data is not being exposed to the user using that chatbot answers that the user is not allowed to access.
Yeah, I don't think the chatbot's accessing anything from Dataverse. Well, not directly anyway. I believe the chatbot just kind of gives you what you feed it in terms of what's publicly available on the website. So not even what someone could log in to see, but in the case where I had with the support desk, I would want to make sure that my knowledge base was public so that it can essentially crawl my site. But it's not going to give you access, like it's not crawling your Dataverse environment and looking for things in there, as far as I know.
Is
So
that
it's
a feature that we
it's-
can have in the Power Pages? Like
Sorry, say
a
that again?
chatbot or a AI feature which can crawl into the Dataverse data?
Like you have basically what you need to do is, sorry, it's Robert. Basically what you need to do is crawl that data yourself and then feed that into the chatbot to train it.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna do it automatically. It doesn't know anything that you don't teach it. So you basically have to teach the chatbot what you want it to know, and then it'll operate that way. That would be actually a really great future topic for one of these meetings is chatbots, because I think we haven't seen enough of that. And another exciting avenue is like doing things like ChatGPT integration into Power Virtual Agent. So hopefully that's something we'll see in a future session.
And that's what this chatbot is doing, is it's underneath the scenes is actually doing I believe it's a Power Virtual Agent through this. So I think it's just kind of a basic one, and then what the kind of added bonus of when you do it through the Power Pages site is that it kind of automatically indexes your Power Pages site. It's kind of like it's like a basic Power Virtual Agent with that additional capability of indexing your site. That's my understanding of it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I think
definitely
it's possible
I would.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say that definitely I would highly recommend and ask you to think about like adopting some of the AI technologies that being introduced, like OpenAI or ChatGPT, and see the potential opportunities that we can have those features being surfaced on the portals. And maybe we can think about it and have another community demo on that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Just to like further your point, Nick, I think it's possible to stand up a very simple chatbot without utilizing Power Virtual Agent, whereas Power Virtual Agent is actually like a user. I don't think it needs a license, but it's actually like a user in the system that you then
Gotcha.
as literally a virtual agent, right? Just like you would a live human agent. So it works slightly different from the simple quote unquote chatbot.
Gotcha.
But you almost always want to use a Power Virtual Agent because it's a way better user experience.
Right.
These are great features to be used for the customer services, for the like the request that comes from the customers, and those sort of things.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Great discussion. So I think that covers. That was the chatbot question. I'm going to talk about next templates. So this is something that's new. Templates weren't they've been a thing for kind of ever. Even back in the ADX Studio days, there were certain templates that you could do, but the number of templates was pretty static for many years. When we got Power Dynamics 365 portals or Power Apps portals, we really just kind of had a basic template. We've had the customer self-service, employee self-service, partner, and community. Those are the 5 templates that have been around for years and years and years. I'm seeing Craig Fleming's. Is that a glass or is that a light? Hey, Craig. Wireframe Studios, yeah. So one of the big things with Power Pages is the fact that they are introducing more and more templates. And so these templates are more like, they're often kind of building out specific business scenarios, but there's also just some kind of random, just different kind of layouts, different colors. So we got the starter layouts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We still have the old Dynamics templates. So we got the, as I mentioned, community, customer self-service, employee self-service, field service. So some of these we have a modern community, but you can see here, rather than 5, we have a whole bunch more. Some of the newer ones that they've introduced: program registration, application processing. They just had FAQ added, I don't know, a month or 2 ago. So these are cool for a few reasons. One, it's just cool to see how different ways that you can implement Power Pages. By actually installing these in say a trial or a test environment, you can actually see different ways that these things have been implemented. Now, I would say that the people building these templates aren't necessarily the people building the product. So there are kind of different, interesting techniques being used. Some of them I like, maybe not some of them I love, but there is a variety of different. You're seeing different, different examples of how someone might implement Power Pages. So there's lots of like interesting code snippets in there, and we're currently kind of going through a blog post series where I look at the different kind of cool techniques that are being used in there. So if you're interested in that, you can check out that was what our latest blog post, and I'm going to do a whole kind of series on those different things. But there are a lot of templates, and we continue to see more. Like I said, FAQ was just recently released, but they've also added a new modern community, the order returns, these starter layout templates, and then these 4 here at the top: program registration, application processing, FAQ, and schedule and manage meetings. Lots of cool stuff in there. Custom PCF controls, lots of different stuff in there. So that's relatively new. And that's something that just kind of only exists. Templates is something that's kind of new with Power Pages.
Hey, Nick, quick question while we're on templates. If I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there used to be a limitation where you could only use one predefined template per, let's say, per environment. Is that still a limitation, or can you use multiple predefined templates now?
You can use multiple. Okay. Yep. You can install as many, I think. Last number I remember, I think it was like you can have 50 sites, and I'm sure that's probably not I don't know what the technical limitation is there, but you can have lots, and you can keep reusing the same one over and over. For the technical folks on the call, the reason for that is that when you installed one of those templates, all the records that got installed had a specific ID, so you couldn't install another set of those because the IDs would have they would have tried to insert another record with the same ID. So Microsoft eventually sorted out the concerns with that, where they generate new IDs. That does introduce some other challenges in other places, where if you install the same template in 2 different environments, they have completely different IDs for the records. So that introduces some other fun challenges. But yeah, that's what they did to solve that particular problem.
Awesome, thank you. And sorry, one final question. Field service was, I think it's in preview. Do you happen to know, is the field service template actually live right now? I can see, obviously I see it here on the screen, but is it actually GA?
I do not know the answer to that one.
Okay. I'll have a dig around.
I mean, they usually label them as preview when they're in preview, but I don't know. I can't be 100% sure.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go back to here. So what else is new? A lot of the functionality that used to exist in what was called the Power Apps Portal Admin Center has been moved into the Power Platform Admin Center. I know that even in the last month or so, they've moved over like turning on SharePoint and turning on Power BI into the Power Platform Admin Center. So the old Power Apps Portals Admin Center, I think it's going to be gone. I think it's supposed to be gone at some point in the summer. So everything's been moved into Power Platform Admin Center. There's lots of cool like little kind of just toggle it. Like, so we're talking about chatbots, like toggle it, you got a chatbot. There's also things for web application firewall. So you like check this. Now you've got a WAF in front of your Power Pages site. Check this. Now you've got a CDN for serving static files. So that's really cool that it's just, again, it's like you check that box, you get what you get. You need something really, really fancy. Well, you could still, you always could have a CDN. You always could have a WAF if you set it up yourself, but there's now an easy way to check a box, have it set up for you. Virtual tables. So virtual tables are becoming a bigger and bigger story within Dataverse. If you're not familiar with virtual tables, it's essentially a way that in Dataverse, you define your schema for a table. So you say, here's the table name, here are all the columns for that table, but the actual data itself doesn't sit in the database in Dataverse. It actually comes from somewhere else. So whether that's SharePoint or SQL, or you can really have the data come in from anywhere. And then as the application needs it, it's performing the queries to get that data from other systems. Those are, for a while they were, because I was just talking to the product team about this, because I was like, I thought those were always supported. And it was like, they always could kind of work because Power Pages works with Dataverse. And if you have a virtual table, but there are always kind of kinks in the road. There's always something like, oh, that doesn't work 100%. Microsoft is doing a lot of work to like kind of not official, but like kind of say, here are the officially approved virtual table providers that if you use those, we'll stand behind those working. So recently announced were the virtual table providers for SQL and for SharePoint. So if you're looking to bring in data from SharePoint or SQL, you can do that via virtual table, and that's completely supported in Power Pages. And I know that they're working to add more to the kind of officially supported list. We've also got Power Automate integration. So for forever, we've had integration with classic workflows, but now you can, using the Power Pages web API, trigger a Power Automate cloud flow. And that's done by, there's actually a special trigger in Power Automate now for Power Pages. So that's really cool. Something that we're just starting to play with now is ALM with solutions. So essentially the ability to move your portal configuration data between environments with solutions. Historically, ALM has always been a bit of a challenge, moving data between environments, because Power Pages is a combination of stuff that's in a solution and a bunch of stuff that isn't in a solution. So you have to figure out, how am I going to move the data between the environments after I've moved the solutions? Microsoft is working to make it so that the website data actually can be incorporated in a solution and moved across. So that's in preview now. I've heard that there's maybe some kinks with it. I think it's still, honestly, we're still probably a little ways away from us doing that on a day-to-day basis in our regular projects, because I think there's still enough stuff that needs to be ironed out before we can do that. And, examples would be, having different site settings in different environments. Like if you include a site setting as part of your package, you may not want to move that. If it's, say, the site setting for your authentication, you may not want to move that to upstream environments. So, but that's kind of the long-term vision, is that you can actually include your Power Pages sites as part of a solution and move them across. So that's in preview. And then also developer sites. So for those of us who play around with Power Pages, doing demos, doing conference sessions, that sort of thing, we now have the developer sites. So we don't have to worry about our sites disappearing after 30 days. As long as you're actively using them, you can create developer sites within developer Power Platform environments. So that's part of the old kind of community plan, or the developer plan that you get with Power Platform. If you create a developer Dataverse environment, you can put it into you can create developer sites within that you can create developer Power Pages site within that environment. And honestly, there's a ton more in terms of like what's new. Those I thought were the highlights over the last little while with Power Pages. I'm seeing questions here. Are elastic tables also supported in Power Pages? I don't know what an elastic table is, so I do not know. Is that a new
Elastic table
feature?
is a new table being added to the Power Apps. It has a lot of like features that a normal table of Power Apps in the Dataverse has, but there are some new features of automatic data removal and flexible schema with JSON columns and those sort of things, which comes with the Elastic tables.
Oh, yeah, my guess would be probably not. But it just kind of depends because I mean, Power Pages it's similar to with like virtual tables because in theory they should work because they just act as another table in Dataverse. But there were just a few things. The biggest challenge always with the virtual tables was getting the security model right because the way things are related and performing those queries properly. So yeah, but I don't know if that's something that's supported. I haven't heard anything about that.
No problem.
All right. That's all I have for today, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Maybe Nick, talk about the extensibility considerations. Obviously, design studios rapidly maturing. Any considerations everyone should know for the extensibility with Power Pages?
Yeah, so I mean, Power Pages is kind of sold as the low code type thing, but there's really no limits to what if someone says, can you do this with Power Pages? The answer is pretty much always yes. It's, do you have the timeline and the budget to do it? So in terms of just say lists and forms, there's Power Pages supports PCF controls. So if you write a code component or whatever they're called these days. So if you write a code component, you can do that to replace data set control. So if you're looking at a view or a subgrid, you can essentially overwrite the way that works out of the box. If you're looking at individual controls on a form, you can also use PCF controls there as well, or you can use the Liquid language, which is the server-side language that we can use in Power Pages. You can use that to essentially embed a PCF control, in any arbitrary place that supports Liquid, which is pretty much anywhere. So with that, you can pretty much do anything with the Power Pages web API. You now can write, client-side applications that talk back to Dataverse in a secure way. Using architectures like the companion app, you can talk to third-party services with the new Power Automate trigger. You can also talk to anything that does connectors. One thing to note is that even though it's part of the Power Platform, Power Pages doesn't have its data source is Dataverse. It's not the connector framework, so you can't just directly tie in other parts of the Power other connectors that may exist for say Power Automate or for Canvas apps. Like those don't work directly with Power Pages. But again, if you start looking at things like virtual tables, if you look at the Power Automate integration, there are ways to talk to other data sources, but it's not just quite as simple as, oh, I see there's a connector for SAP, I can bring in all my SAP data. It's unfortunately not that easy, but there's lots of ways that you can extend Power Pages. They can kind of do whatever you want, but I would say that we have a lot of people who are interested in Power Pages and they see it as a platform where they're going to just develop an entire custom app. I would generally question that approach just because, again, Power Pages isn't necessarily the cheapest thing out there. If you're not using the lists and form functionality, then I'm not sure why you're using this particular product. That doesn't mean that you don't have a site that has a lot of that kind of out-of-the-box functionality with a few extra, cool things that you've built yourself. Great. But if you're just going to use it as a place to store all of your custom code, you're probably better off using an Azure server, Azure server that you buy yourself. It'll probably be cheaper than licensing Power Pages just to get a web host.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Nick, that was a great overview. Unfortunately, I had to drop for a few minutes, but came back. You're still plugging away, and I loved everything you're touching on. I had originally put my hand up because I think Hassan, forgive me if I pronounced that wrong, I wanted to point out a question they had earlier about integrations with AI and some of the potential opportunities to utilize AI features in Power Pages, like AI chatbots and chat. So you might have touched on that when I had to.
We did.
Out.
Yep.
Okay, you did. Okay, good. So sorry about that. One quick question, and I don't know how much detail you want to go in, but your Q&A image is what reminded me of it. There's the whole progressive web app component too, right? So you can have the portal. Oh, sorry, I saw that face. So the portal as an app on your phone. Can you speak a little bit about that, and perhaps the reaction to that is maybe it's not a great feature or function, but
yeah, I think the way that is, I think that can kind of lead to people thinking it does a lot more than what it does. So the progressive web app is a way that you can take a website and make it feel a little bit more like a native application on your devices. So doing things like put in an icon, so you click the icon and it shows up. So it's kind of like you click the icon and it kind of looks like it's an app on your phone. But the other thing that people talk about is the offline capabilities. And I think that most people think, oh, great, like I could go and I could submit support cases when I'm offline. And really the offline capabilities are its ability to cache like static web pages. So yeah, if you have a knowledge-based site and people want to see that when they're offline, yeah, it can work. But any of the stuff that like interacts with the APIs, like directly, like none of that stuff works. So it's basically kind of, it's able to kind of download a cached version of the website, but yeah, it's not sophisticated enough to be like, okay, I'm going to submit a case, and then when you submit that case, once I connect it again, then it'll actually submit it. Because that, like, progressive web app is isn't something that was invented by Power Pages. It's like, that's a thing that is possible, right? Like you can build a progressive web app that will allow you to submit a case when you're offline and then synchronize when you go back. Power Pages just doesn't do that. So I think there's kind of like trading on the fact that other things can do this. And we mentioned we have PWA, but it's really like, I haven't had a customer that's wanted to turn it on and thinks like, and actually uses it, right? Unless you have, again, knowledge base is the only one I can really think of where you've got a knowledge base there that you want people who are in the field to be able to use. But people kind of go to it for the offline stuff, and I think it's not quite as good as people wish it was.
Entirely fair. Thank you. I don't. Oh, you're on mute.
Hassan, you're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry. Any, like always, it was very informative and awesome community call. So the question that I have is that you talked about the PCF controls. We all know that how we can use the PCF controls on the Power Pages, but have you seen a PCF control that is not supported on the Power Pages, and what features or what kind of PCF controls that are using what type of like technology are not supported, if you know about that?
Yeah, so like the dependencies that you can put into a PCF control that's supported on Power Pages is like the list that you can actually use is pretty low. With a general PCF control, like you can think, oh, we need the camera, we need access to this. We need, like with Power Pages, the list that you can really add is you can take a dependency on the web API, because Power Pages will give you that. And I think that's pretty much it. Like, so anything other than the web API, you're not going to get access to, because it is a, it's still just kind of a regular web application. So PCF controls, I mean, there's PCF.gallery where there's a whole bunch of community stuff. The thing I always kind of caution people with PCF controls is, if you think you're just going to take a PCF control that was meant for Canvas apps or meant for model-driven app and just drop it on your Power Pages site, I've seen people do it, and sometimes it works. It often doesn't look great because the UI frameworks used by those two are completely different. Power Pages uses Bootstrap, right now version 3, moving to version 5, and the model-driven apps or Canvas apps are built using the Fluent UI. So PCF controls, if they're, you could build a React component that was smart enough to switch between those two, and like you can say, oh, I want this on my Power Pages site and kind of look, but generally we're seeing that, if we're building a PCF control, you can leverage a lot of that investment that you've made for the other UIs, but you're often going to want to do a custom UI for Power Pages that's more based on Bootstrap, so that it feels like it's a part of that thing. So yeah, it's a great way to extend it, but it's not as easy as we're just like, oh, I'll go to PCF Gallery, download it, and install it, and it will look great.
Thank you. And thank you for all the time that you have saved me along in last like 8 years along different portal projects by watching your videos and your portal pages. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm glad there's at least one person out there watching them.
There's 2 at least for sure.
2.
Yeah.
Why?
Make it 3.
Are you talking about my parents?
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
My parents listen to my podcast, even though they have no idea what any of it means, but they're like, I don't know, they're both retired and clearly have nothing better to do.
Oh, that's good support.
Yeah.
That's good. I don't see any other questions being posted, so I think I speak for everybody, and it's already in the chat. Thank you, Nick, for great overview, great presentation, as always. Appreciate the input and insight. Anybody have anything else that they want to touch on or talk about, or curveballs they can try and throw at Nick?
Nick, what breed is your puppy?
Oh, I don't know, some stupid lab. Sorry, did I say my puppy? I meant to say my wife's puppy.
Yeah, we'll see.
It's a lab, something else. I could never. Before we got it, I didn't even know that this other breed of dog. But it's like we got it from a shelter, and it's black, and it chews on everything we love.
You'll be the one walking it every day and loving it.
Well, we have another. Like, this is our second dog. The trade was I get to go on a golf trip every year in the winter, and my wife got another dog. So I mean, I already got to go on my golf trip. So I guess. I just got to wait till January, February for this to all pay off again.
Oh, hey, come to Toronto. Rick and I will take you out.
Unfortunately, I was supposed to play this afternoon, but we had another dump of rain, so our course is closed again today. It's been a kind of a crazy weather season here in Regina. We've already had 3 downpours. We have water in the office, and we've been in the office for 5 years and only had like it just kind of seeps up from like underneath. We're assuming there's like a crack in the floor. And like it being in this building for 5 years, we've had it twice. Now we've had it 3 times in the last week because it's just everything's just so saturated here. It's just crazy.
Wow.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks everyone for showing up, and yeah, if you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, please do that. We have if I can plug we have a community call next week. We do one every month, so. If you have more questions, you can join us there because we always leave a Q&A session there as well.
Awesome. Excellent. And that's thank you again, Nick. And that, as I said earlier at the top of the call, we're not convening July and August. But again, if you have suggestions, thoughts, items, throw them in the chat while you're still here, or email myself or Rick. You can find us on LinkedIn as well. Reach out to us and share your ideas and thoughts, and we'll be sure to put things on the docket for the fall when we resume. Thanks, everybody. Have a great summer.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Good summer. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.